Hey guys, Ben, aka Reading Vicariously here. So I know it's been a couple weeks since my last video. I think when I started this channel, I said I was going to try to do one a week, and that hasn't really happened yet, but I'm hoping that maybe I can get into a better schedule. Life's just been crazy, busy with work and some side things I've been trying to do, and we just moved last weekend, so still, unpacking and all the fun stuff that comes with that. As you can see, I'm not in my, normal space right now because I don't really have a space yet because of everything. So yeah, I'm in a corner of my bedroom. So that's what's going on. But anyways, I'm excited to share a new video with you guys. So this is going to be the next in a series of interviews, author interviews that I've been doing with Janine Pipe. If you don't know Janine, she is a fellow reviewer and blogger and podcaster and writer and just an amazing person. And so she and I have been doing these author interviews. They're all authors from Silver Shamrock Publishing, and we're trying to do one or two of them a month throughout the entire year. So I will link to earlier interviews that we've done in the notes below. But this is going to be our fourth one, and we're interviewing author David Barclay, whose brand new book just came out from Silver Shamrock, and it's called The Devil's Mistress. So I hope you guys enjoy this video.
There we go. Okay, well, thank you very much, David, for joining us. So you're in California, is that right?
Yeah, I'm living in Napa right now.
In Napa, okay. The only thing I know about Napa is it famous for wine?
Yeah, that's right. So I work remotely as a game developer out of the San Francisco Bay Area, and my wife and I moved to Napa a couple years ago. So it's been great. It's very quiet, but still, about an hour away from the city. So we're up here just hanging out now, still in quarantine.
Of course, yeah, because you've had like a rolling quarantine in California for quite a while now, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been up and down. So it's been pretty restrictive for a while, and they've just started to pull things back. So that's a good sign, I think. Like the restaurants are opening back up. The gym is open up down the street. So it's getting better slowly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll just do a quick introduction. So I'm Janine Pipe. I'm a writer, an editor, reviewer, and a booktuber. And Ken got in touch with us from Silver Shamrock and asked if we could interview some of the writers, hence why we're now talking to you today. I think you're our fourth victim. Is that right, Ben? Yep.
Yep, number 4.
Number 4, thank you. And I am joined, as always, by the lovely Ben. Would you like to say a few things?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Ben. I'm a book reviewer at readingvicariously.net, and also I write horror reviews for several other websites as well. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Okay, David, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your career as a writer?
So as a writer, essentially, I'm just getting started, I guess. I published my first novel a few years ago called The Ashless, and that was kind of putting one foot into the writing world to see if it's something that I wanted to do. And at the time, I wasn't sure if I was going to do it full time, if I was going to come back. So it was a big learning experience. And I decided, I guess, a couple years ago to go and to really throw myself back into it. So I've been writing full time, more or less, for a couple years. So The Devil's Mistress is what I hope is the first in a bunch of projects that are going to come out over the next couple years.
Awesome. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, Devil's Mistress, without, spoiling anything, what can you tell us is your latest release from Silver Shamrock?
So I originally pitched it as Carrie meets the Crucible. So, Stephen King, once said that story ideas often come with the collision of two unexpected ideas. And I don't know if that's always true, but it was true in this case where I started thinking about a story about a young woman who was accused of witchcraft, but instead of being railroaded or tortured mercilessly for a long time, I thought, like, what happens if she actually has like some of the powers that they're accusing her of, or what happens if she at least has the capacity for those. So that was kind of the starting point, and it just took like a little bit of experimentation to figure out that I wanted to set it kind of in the early 18th century in America. And it's about this young woman who comes from a fairly wealthy family named Isabella, who appears to have the perfect life. And everything is not as it appears, though. Her fiance is like kind of a sadistic businessman, kind of a madman. And she's secretly in love with one of the servants who serves her father, like in their estate. And so she's willing to do anything really to get out of the predicament that she's currently in. So she visits this apothecary, this old woman who lives in the hills, who's purported to have mystic powers. And it should be like a very simple visit, but things quickly go downhill from there, and her life is turned upside down very rapidly. So that's kind of the starting point for where the story kicks off, and it goes from there.
Yeah, so I've been reading it, and you did a good job of several things, but one of them making the fiance really easy to hate.
Oh, yes.
Horrible person. I don't know if you've seen Game of Thrones, but there's a character, I think Ramsay is his name. And it reminds me very much of him, just how, like you said, sadistic he is and his treatment of people. But did you know, going into this, that you wanted to make it kind of this coming of age, like love story as well? Was that always going to be a part of it?
It's funny you should ask that. No. I think when I first pictured it in my mind, I felt like the beginning of the story was going to be rather short, and we were going to get into kind of the trials very quickly, and then there was going to be this long section at the end, which was kind of the horror part of the book. But as I started writing, I realized that there was a lot more story in the beginning that I anticipated. And I think working with that made me kind of glad that I'm a pantser. Like, so there's two kinds of writers. Like there's the planners and the pansters.
Right.
And the planners typically like outline things early, and I prefer to kind of go in with kind of these broad goals, like kind of this character journey in the back of my mind, and kind of let the story write itself. So sometimes I know the ending and sometimes I don't. I often know like major points along the way, and then I just kind of let things try to steer things in that direction. So when I first started writing, like there was a lot more there than I anticipated. Like Jacob, who makes an appearance like on the first page, wasn't even really in my head. And I think if I tried to plot it out like more mathematically and tried to adhere to a strict outline, I think it would have turned out much worse. So I think some of those relationships just kind of evolved naturally, and I hope it feels like organic in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it does. It felt like it was intentional. It seemed, to progress naturally. I think it's probably better for it that you do have that relationship in there. I really like the scenes in the book where they're trying to figure out if she's a witch or not. I'm glad that you also spent time kind of really going into detail on those, because those are a lot of fun. And then the, kind of more the outright horror, the final act. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
Cool. Excellent.
Me too, definitely. And I'm the same. I'm a total pantser when it comes to writing. Sometimes like you say, I have like a real kind of like seed of an idea, and then I haven't got a clue where I'm going with it, and it just evolves, and sometimes you don't even know and you surprise yourself. And I think that can make writing more exciting as well, rather than just knowing exactly, right, now I have to write this and now I have to write that. It's more organic sometimes when the ideas just form themselves as you're writing. I've got another question to ask, but that reminded me of something. Did you always plan for Jacob, because he has the wooden leg? Was that always something that was kind of conscious in your mind, that you wanted to have some that kind of representation? Where did that come from?
That just kind of grew organically. I think just in the back of my mind, just thinking about the time period, it was a very harsh time to be alive. And I think all the characters, especially the more innocent ones, have some kind of scarring. And I think that's just reflected, just a physical reflection of just maybe the metaphor of the time period of having these innocent people in this time period where they're very much like a victim of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I can't help but think of Pirates of the Caribbean and things like that when I was reading about it. That's what I can see in my mind.
Oh yeah, it's the right period, right? Like the
exactly.
golden age of piracy is like the early 18th century. So for sure.
I liked that. Okay, so the next question is Silver Shamrock covers are always eye-catching, and here it is. Absolutely. I mean, I'm slightly biased because this kind of turquoisey green color here is my absolute favorite color, and it just pops out. It's beautiful. So did you have any input into the cover, and what do you think of that finished product?
Yeah, I love the cover. Ken and I had conversations about that early, and we decided to go with kind of a character cover. Like we knew we wanted Isabella on the cover. So it was just it was a back and forth process. I think it's funny, but I've had this experience a couple times where you start talking to a cover artist and the first inclination is to go like super heavy on the horror. So, you know, there's like, you know, like a really demonic looking person and like blood and stuff like that. And you're like, okay, let's pull back a little bit and see what we're communicating. But I think that's just iteration. Like, I think it turned out great. Like, I love the model that he used, and, you know, it's very creepy at the same time, but I think it conveys like the right kind of thing. So I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, because the actual story is more obviously like supernatural and like almost like folklore and gothic and that kind of thing. If you had something like really terrifying on the front, it wouldn't have given the right sort of feeling for the actual story. So I think it's absolutely perfect. I do love it. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to jump back real quick, if I can, to the some of the writing of Devil's Mistress. So you set the book specifically in Virginia in 1705, and I saw there's a little note at the very end of the book where you mentioned that, and you said, you know, I could have said it 50 years earlier, you know, kind of thinking around that and kind of wanting that clash of the old and kind of more modern way of thinking, I guess, modern. What were your concerns like with historical accuracy, and what kinds of research did you have to do, or did you do in the writing of this?
A bunch. I think the most useful thing I did in the very beginning as I got started was I went and I read a whole bunch of fiction from the time. So I started like 17th century with Pilgrim's Progress, I think was probably the earliest, and then up through Robinson Crusoe. I reread what else? Castle on Tronto, Diary of Benjamin Franklin, just going up, I think, through the 18th century, just getting a feel for the language of the time. And then, of course, there's, you know, Malleus Maleficarum and the demonology of King James and a lot of the witch trial stuff at the time. So that was just kind of to immerse myself in the language of the time. And it's tough because you don't want to write a story that could exist in that time period because it'd be really boring. It'd be really like language, like the language has come like so far. But at the same time, I think you want to try to evoke like the time period. So it was a struggle, like at first, to figure out kind of the right cadence for the writing. And I have like a weird process. Like for this book in particular, I think I rewrote the first chapter maybe like 10 times, and it's just trying to get like a feel for what the cadence of the language was. Like sometimes it was like too long, and sometimes it was too modern. So I landed, I think, in a place where it feels like I wanted to have like kind of a brisk pace, but at the same time, like have those things that evoke the feel of the time. So like some of the vocabulary, for example, is pulled like straight from the 18th century. And every once in a while, like I tried to throw in like a really long, like run-on sentence or like something that you could imagine like in a book from the time period. And it was funny, like I had discussions with my editor, like at the time, like he's like, these sentences are really long. I'm like, I know, like stylistically, like, we want just a couple, like every now and then to remind you that you're kind of in that time period. So I hope it strikes a balance. It was tough.
Yeah, I did notice that, not just in the dialogue of the characters, but you're saying even in just the narrative itself, that was kind of a conscious effort to kind of make it feel, not that you're, like you said, you're reading a book from back then, but that you kind of are, though. You're back in that time period, like just in the writing of the narrative. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it definitely works. And obviously being British as well, I could feel, I was back there. You managed to transport me back with the language, so it definitely worked. But at the same time, it wasn't for somebody who didn't know anything about the time period, you wouldn't feel that you couldn't understand it. It wouldn't put you off if you didn't know about that time, because it's still very understandable and readable, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think you got that perfect balance between you feel like you're there, but you're not needing to pick up a dictionary or a thesaurus or something to try and understand what you're talking about. So yeah, perfect balance, I would say.
Cool. Yeah, that's the risk. I think if you mess it up, then you appeal to neither genre or historical. So you have to walk the line and try to
fine line there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned at the start that your first novel was published quite a few years ago. How do you feel that you've grown as a writer since then, and what have you learnt about the craft which helped you to write The Devil's Mistress?
So The Ashless was my first novel, and I actually just wrote a little blog post about this. Like, so your first novel, they often say, like, you write for yourself. And so that was kind of my attempt really to incorporate like all the things I love. So it's a very like action-packed, like kind of an action horror story. There's monsters and explosions and gunfights and Antarctica and intrigue and backstabbing and all these things together. And I think the story was very cool. Like I really liked writing it, but I felt like I had a lot to learn like as a writer. And I think this kind of coalesced for me. Like it actually coalesced for me when I got my first 2-star review. And this isn't something that writers ever like to talk about. But the first 2-star review I got from NetGalley was very well thought out. And it was from this woman who read the story, and she's like, it started out really strong, and I really like some of the elements, but it wasn't really a character story. And I really wanted to get more into these characters' heads and like have more of a character journey with them rather than this action and stuff there. So I kind of thought about that, and it's easy when you look at those kinds of reviews to be like, oh, you're wrong, and it's great. But really, like I felt like I really wanted to be more of a character-centric author, like, and there's a lot of stuff that I really wanted to learn. And when I look at like my favorite authors, those are the stories that really sit with me, the ones that are really character-driven. And so after that, like I'd written a few short stories, but I just kind of immersed myself kind of in the writing world. Like I went to a whole bunch of writers' conferences. I started reading like all the time. Like I just kind of broadened what I was doing. And when I went back at it again a couple of years ago, I felt like I had a much greater understanding of the writer that I wanted to be. And so that The Devil's Mistress is really like the first kind of complete like novel that kind of has come out of that effort. And I'm quite happy with it. Like that doesn't necessarily mean people will like it, but I'm quite happy with the direction that I've been able to go because of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years. So as far as I'm concerned, I think the floodgates are open and hopefully full steam ahead from here on out.
Was your first one self-pubbed, or did that go out through a publisher?
It was self-pubbed.
Yeah, okay. So you could say that you've already progressed, because not that there's anything wrong with self-publishing. I say that I'm about to self-publish something myself as well. But now you know that what you've done has been good enough to be picked up by someone as amazing as Silver Shamrock as well. And they don't pick up just, anything. Ken will make sure that that's something that obviously that he can sell and that it stays with the reputation of the press. So that's major kudos being put out through Silver Shamrock, definitely.
Oh, cheers! I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to work with them. So yeah,
Yeah,
it was nice.
awesome.
Awesome. All right, so this might take us a little bit out in left field, and I was just curious because I know you have a background in game development, and that's what you've done for a number of years.
Mhm.
What was kind of your role in that? I was just kind of curious in the game development world.
So I do have a couple credits as a writer, but my mainstay, I'm a level designer by trade. And so
Okay.
I work on console games, essentially, like PlayStation, Xbox, PC. And so level designers, we build space and gameplay, essentially. So we, yeah, take a bunch of assets and create like the gameplay within a space, essentially. So I primarily worked on large open world action titles or RPG titles.
Okay. Did that, because I'm always curious, when you have different fields that kind of have some overlap oftentimes, games are telling stories and building worlds and things like that. Did your work as a game developer help influence anything with your, set design of your scenes in the book or your world building or anything along those lines? Is there any kind of connection there?
I think more spiritual than directly, like, because
Okay.
I haven't worked on any games necessarily that are historical horror per se, but I
Sure.
think just in terms of the narrative process, like working with writers, dialogue, just little things that you pick up working with writers in the game world
Mhm.
really help. And really, just knowing where the quality bar is, I think in games is like a must, because when you're working with other people in creative field, in games or other authors, you're always kind of inspiring each other and picking up little things. And I think
Mm.
it really helps to be around like talented people.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so who are some of your own favourite writers, and have they influenced your work at all? And you've already mentioned that you like your the stories that you read to be character driven. So can you tell us about some of your favourites, please?
Sure. So growing up, I think my favorite writer was probably Robert McCammon and
Oh.
Clive Barker, Stephen King, like all the big authors. I think more recently, I feel like I'm discovering new people all the time now. Like I discovered like Tom Detty a couple years ago, Stephen Graham Jones. Even more recently, like Evie Knight. Like I'm reading The Fourth Horror, which is great. Um, and I'm trying to read like a lot of different genres as well. So like thrillers are relevant. Like I really like Gillian Flynn. Fantasy, like I love George R. R. Martin, of course, Scott Lynch, Jim Butcher. So trying to pull influences from all over.
Yeah. Do you feel so? Your first book, you said you threw all these things in. It's very action heavy and all of this stuff, but it's got monsters. This one is a little more supernatural, but it's got horror. Do you feel yourself kind of staying in the horror genre? Do you want to explore other or kind of cross genres in some of your upcoming stuff or future works?
So all the stuff I'm working on immediately is still horror genre, but I think the spectrum varies a little bit. Like the next book I have coming out is like a modern day, almost like fairy tale, like horror fairy tale. I
Hmm.
have like one that has a little that's near future that has a little sci-fi bent that may be coming out in the next couple years. And it would be nice to do some fantasy and stuff as well, but I think even that will probably be a little bit dark. So I'll probably stay in horror for the foreseeable future.
Awesome. Good.
Yeah.
Well, that actually, so my next question was going to be, are there any upcoming, stories or projects that you're working on that you'd want to tell us about? So we're kind of heading in that direction. The one that you're working on right now, you said it was kind of like a dark fairy tale type one. Is that kind of your next one?
Yeah, so that was just announced. So that is called The Maker's Box, and that will be out through Aphotic Realm in just a couple of months.
Oh, okay. They're cool guys as well. Yeah.
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 Can you tell us anything about it?
I can tell you the premise.
Yes.
It is about a teenage girl who receives a box with a beating human heart in it for her 16th birthday, and her father asks her to keep it alive and keep it safe.
Ooh, okay.
Yep. I read that premise the other day and I got really excited. That just sounds so like intriguing where that's gonna go. So I'm ready.
So, I know where it would go if I was writing it, and it probably won't be even remotely in the same kind of way. Okay, so this wasn't on our preparation list, but I'm going to throw in a couple of questions. Is there any subgenre of horror that you wouldn't write? Is there any kind of like, oh no, either that you don't feel comfortable with or that you just don't like? And they always say, obviously, write what you like, write what you know. So anything that you wouldn't do?
That's a tough question. I don't want to say never to anything. I think, again, I'm probably drawn to more character stuff. So maybe some of the more action heavy splatterpunk is probably not in the foreseeable future. But yeah, who knows? Like I don't know. I'd probably say I'll write just about anything at one point in time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then on the flip side, is there anything sort of like a creature feature or ghost, haunted house story or anything like that? Is there something that you would really like to have a go at that perhaps you haven't started yet?
Secretly, I do kind of want to write a fantasy horror novel, but I know that it's going to take some time to do, so I've been kind of pushing that off to the side. But one day, probably.
Yeah,
take time just because of like the world building and all of that you would have to do. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think fantasy is very challenging, and if I did write that, it would be in its own universe. It would be more traditional fantasy, but I think with more of like a horror bent. So I know that will take some time. I don't want to spend 5 years doing it, so maybe I'll do it kind of in the background while I work on other things.
Sure.
Yeah, I hadn't realised fantasy, it's not my favourite, and I don't think I'd ever be able to write it, but I have friends that write it, and they've got maps, and they've almost got like Wikipedia pages and stuff because of all the characters and all like the bits, and it's just like, it's mind-blowing. Even the preparation for a fantasy book is almost a book in itself, so hats off to anybody that does that kind of thing, I think. Right, where are we? Ben, did you have any more off-the-cuff questions that you wanted to ask that have come from the conversation at all?
I had one that popped in my head that doesn't really have anything to do with books. I'll ask that one. Throwing stuff out there. Because this is back from the beginning. I should have asked this earlier. Since you live in Napa now, and that's wine country and everything, is that? And I one of your bios at Twitter somewhere I saw you a wine enthusiast. Is that something that you feel like the wine aficionado? What do they call a sommelier? Right? Was that you before you moved? Have to be
sommelier? No, not at all. It's just one of those things that we take advantage of while we're here. It's funny because my wife, we have like a grocery store up the street that sells like $3 and $4 bottles of wine, and so she's taken it upon herself to buy like all the $3 and $4 bottles of wine and try to pick like the best and worst of those, which I just can't drink like at all. So she thinks I'm snobby because I buy like the $20 bottles of wine. But yeah, like I think there's a lot of good places around here, probably too many to count. If you're going to buy Napa wine, I'd suggest something from the Carneros conglomerate. They're usually a safe bet, like all different kinds, like Pinots or Cabernets or whatever. So that's what I drink a lot of around here.
Okay, cool. I'm not a wine person at all, so any kind of like, hey, this is what you should drink. Okay, I'll try that. So that sounds good.
Fair enough.
And I'd be joining your wife with the $3 wine.
They're great for cooking, so I'll give you that.
That's it, or cleaning the sink.
There you go.
So what else? I'm rubbish with California, unless it's Anaheim, which is where like Disney and everything is. I don't really know. So whereabouts are you? Where's your next biggest city?
So San Francisco is just south of us. So we're generally in the north. It's a little bit colder and rainier here than in LA, but it's still California. San Francisco is just south, and LA is about 8 hours south of that.
8 hours. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I know California is large, but that's like it's. Sounds like it's almost as big as Britain.
Yeah, you're not used to that, Janine. You have to drive a long way and still be in the same state.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can go from almost one end of England to the other in 8 hours. It's just crazy. I forget how massive America is and all your beautiful states. Okay, where can people find you, David? Where can we have links to? And you mentioned your blog as well. So we'll make sure that we put them down in the links below. But tell people where we can find you.
So you can find me at david-barclay.com, and I'm on Twitter and Facebook at Barclay Author. And so my website has links to my previous works. There's a newsletter. I have a free novelette that is there. It's about 12,000 words. So if you subscribe, you'll get a free book, and everything else is on there.
Perfect. And you're on Goodreads and Amazon and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I have an Amazon author page, and I'm on Goodreads as well.
Awesome. Do we know when this is out?
It is out now.
It's out now. Oh,
the paperback just dropped today. So.
Oh, there we go! Yay! Happy birthday!
Yeah.
Oh, how exciting! Okay, awesome. Well, we'll make sure that we'll do some tweets later and get some people's eyes on it then. Okay, awesome. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to either discuss or that you just would like people to know, or have you been quite happy that we've managed to cover everything?
I am quite happy that we managed to cover everything. Feel free to give me a shout on Twitter or send me an email from my website. And that's it. Devil's Mistress is out now.
Awesome. Oh, that's brilliant. I don't know if you can see, but I've especially had my Salem mug.
Oh yeah, a witch mug. Nice.
Yeah. And I also just as I was reading this, because we've just finished it yesterday, I just watched the new Neil Marshall film, The Reckoning, which should be out, I think, on general release. And that's obviously set, although it's in England, it's the same sort of time period with witches and stuff. So I almost feel like it should be Halloween, because I'm like full on witchy now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to that as well. I like Neil Marshall. The Descent was one of the best horror movies, I think, of the early 2000s. So
yes, and Dog Soldiers is the best movie ever, and I will fight people on that.
You will, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I will. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you ever so much, David, for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Ben and I will be making sure that everybody knows about The Devil's Mistress. We'll both be reviewing it for you as well. And thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It was very fun talking to you all.
Cheers. Thank you. Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.